Have you ever wondered why some people seem untouchable by life's betrayals, while others crumble at the slightest rejection? What if everything you've been taught about love, sacrifice, and virtue was actually designed to keep you weak and controllable? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. From childhood, we're bombarded with messages glorifying selflessness. Put others first, they say. True virtue is found in sacrifice. These ideas sound noble, but what if they're actually invisible chains binding you to a life of vulnerability? Has this ever happened to you? You give everything to someone, your time, loyalty, love, only to be discarded when you're no longer useful. The uncomfortable truth is that devotion is rarely pure and loyalty is never eternal. Every relationship, every bond, every alliance exists because both sides derive. Some benefit. And when that balance shifts, when that exchange no longer favors one party, relationships fracture. It's not cynicism, it's the raw reality of human nature that few dare to acknowledge. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The great strategist observed that men who surrender their power through misplaced devotion inevitably find themselves betrayed and broken. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you navigate relationships and power dynamics in your life. The first unshakable law of power is this: love yourself more than anyone else, not through shallow vanity or narcissism, but through disciplined devotion to your own well-being and advancement. When you prioritize yourself, your growth, your protection, your empire, you create an impenetrable fortress that rejection cannot breach, that manipulation cannot penetrate, that loss cannot destroy. Think about it. When you love others more than yourself, you hand them the very weapon that will eventually be turned against you. You surrender your leverage. You become predictable, controllable, exploitable. The moment you need them more than they need you, the power balance has already collapsed in their favor. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because this principle contradicts everything society has conditioned you to believe. Yet the evidence surrounds us. Look at those who wield true influence. They aren't defined by their neediness or their desperate desire for approval. They stand complete within themselves, untouched by the opinions of others, immune to the poison of false loyalty. This doesn't mean becoming cold or cruel. Rather, it means establishing yourself as the primary beneficiary of your own devotion. It means creating boundaries that cannot be violated. It means understanding that your loyalty must first and always be to yourself. But how exactly do you implement this principle in your daily life? What separates those who merely understand this concept intellectually from those who embody it as a living force? The transformation begins with recognizing a fundamental truth about power that most will never grasp. If you're ready to continue this journey toward becoming truly untouchable, hit subscribe now. Join others who've chosen to master themselves before attempting to master the world. The transformation begins when you fully embody this principle, making yourself untouchable. When you prioritize your own well-being and advancement, rejection simply becomes information, not devastation. Manipulation becomes obvious, not ensnaring. Loss becomes temporary, not defining. You move through the world not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who already possesses it from within. This mindset shift doesn't happen overnight. It requires a profound awakening. The cold recognition that in this world, no one is coming to save you. This revelation separates those who ascend from those who remain trapped. Most people spend their lives drowning in illusions, clinging to the comfort of external approval, terrified of standing alone. They wait for rescue that never arrives, for recognition that's always conditional, for loyalty that inevitably fractures. But the journey to power begins in silence, in that moment when you finally confront the hidden truth that you alone are responsible for your empire. This awakening isn't comfortable. It strips away comforting fantasies and forces you to face reality as it truly exists, not as you wish it to be. Yet this moment of clarity becomes the foundation upon which all true strength is built. Behind the scenes of every powerful figure in history lies this same realization. They understood what most refuse to acknowledge. Dependency is poison. It weakens your resolve, clouds your judgment, and makes you vulnerable to those who would use your attachments against you. Consider this uncomfortable reality. The world does not reward kindness without leverage. It does not honor sacrifice without advantage. Loyalty, love, devotion. These are currencies that others will gladly spend until you're bankrupt, and the moment your value dries up, they vanish, leaving you with nothing but the ruins of your misplaced trust. This isn't cynicism, it's strategic awareness. The most impactful decisions in your life will come when you finally recognize that genuine power flows not from what others give you, but from what you refuse to surrender. Your time, your focus, your emotional investment, these are precious resources that must be protected and allocated with precision. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. Machiavelli understood something that most modern people have forgotten: that trust must be given sparingly and dependency must be avoided at all costs. He wasn't writing for dreamers. He was writing for rulers, for those willing to face the brutal laws of reality rather than hide behind comfortable illusions. The first throne you must conquer is the one inside yourself. When you establish yourself as the primary beneficiary of your own loyalty, you create an internal fortress that no external force can breach. When betrayal comes, and it always does, you will not collapse because your foundation remains unshaken. When rejection claws at you, it will find no weakness because you do not beg for validation from others. Write in the comments, "I am my own fortress," if you're ready to begin this transformation, because this is where true power begins, not in controlling others, but in becoming untouchable yourself. To wield this power effectively, you must internalize Machiavelli's most crucial insight: trust sparingly and depend on no one. This revelation isn't about becoming paranoid, it's about recognizing the fundamental nature of human relationships. People will expend your loyalty like currency until you're emotionally bankrupt, then vanish once your utility diminishes. The harsh reality is that most relationships exist within an invisible economy of advantage, persisting only as long as both parties benefit. This mindset shift represents a profound awakening, a complete recalibration of how you navigate your journey through life. Most people distribute their trust carelessly, creating endless vulnerabilities that others inevitably exploit. The enlightened few understand that trust must be earned repeatedly, tested constantly, and withdrawn immediately when compromised. They hold themselves above the desperate need for external validation, recognizing that dependency creates leverage that will eventually be used against them. The paradox that Machiavelli understood is that genuine power never begins with controlling others. It begins with conquering yourself. The first throne you must claim isn't external. It's the sovereignty over your own mind, emotions, and decisions. This internal dominion becomes the foundation for all external influence. Without it, you remain a puppet controlled by the opinions, expectations, and manipulations of others. This principle shatters common misconceptions about self-love. What I'm describing isn't vanity or narcissism. Those are merely masks worn by the deeply insecure. True self-love is a disciplined practice of self-preservation. It's the unwavering commitment to your growth, protection, and advancement, despite external pressures to sacrifice yourself on the altar of others' needs. It's recognizing that your primary loyalty must always be to yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of strategic necessity. When you embrace this mindset, something remarkable happens. You become your own fortress. Imagine constructing an impenetrable citadel around your core self, with walls so thick that rejection simply bounces off them. Betrayal, which devastates most, merely confirms what you already knew about human nature. Abandonment, which destroys the dependent, barely registers as you stand complete within yourself. The hidden revelation here is that becoming your own fortress doesn't isolate you from others. It allows you to engage with them from a position of genuine strength rather than desperate need. Your relationships transform from obligations into choices, from dependencies into alliances. You no longer need others to complete you. You choose to include them in your already complete world. This transformation represents the ultimate form of personal sovereignty. When loyalty to yourself becomes sealed within, the approval of others loses its grip on your decisions. You move through life untouched by the desperate need for validation that enslaves most people. You become the rare individual who can stand alone, not out of arrogance, but out of self-sufficiency. Type "My loyalty is to myself first" in the comments if you recognize this truth, because once you understand that your primary commitment must be to yourself, you begin the journey from dependency to sovereignty, from being a servant of others' opinions to becoming the master of your own destiny. As you embark on this journey of self-mastery, you'll experience a profound revelation, one that shatters comfortable illusions about human relationships. When you begin to rise, when your power becomes evident, the dynamics around you transform in ways most people refuse to acknowledge. Friends who once celebrated your minor victories suddenly view your major ones as personal threats. Colleagues who shared your struggles begin to resent your solutions. Even family, those we're told will support us unconditionally, can become predators when advantage is at stake. Subscribe to this channel if these principles of power have awakened something within you. Each video builds upon this foundation, revealing strategies most will never discover. This metamorphosis isn't a reflection of your character, but a universal principle of human nature that Machiavelli identified centuries ago. Power doesn't just change you. It reveals the true character of everyone around you. The masks begin to slip, and beneath them you discover the raw reality of self-interest that drives all human connections. The enlightened perspective is to recognize that betrayal isn't rare or exceptional. It's the default setting of human behavior when opportunity and advantage present themselves. Machiavelli warned that trust is the most dangerous currency you can exchange. To hand someone your trust is to place your fate in their hands, and most hands are too weak, too self-serving to carry that responsibility with honor. People betray for profit. They betray out of envy. They betray simply because your strength serves as a mirror reflecting their weakness. And the more you rise, the more knives will be sharpened behind your back. This isn't paranoia, it's strategic awareness. The decision to expect betrayal rather than be surprised by it represents a crucial milestone in your development. Here lies the hidden truth most never grasp. Betrayal should never shock you. When you understand human nature at its core, you expect it, you prepare for it, you accept it as the inevitable tax of power. This expectation doesn't make you cynical, it makes you unbreakable. Because when the dagger comes, you don't collapse in emotional devastation. You smile in recognition of a pattern you already anticipated. This mindset creates a remarkable transformation. What would destroy most people becomes your confirmation. The betrayal that was meant to be your downfall becomes irrefutable proof of your dominance. Their treachery only validates your ascension. Their envy becomes your verification. Their attempts to undermine you reveal how threatening your growth has become to their comfort. While others waste energy lamenting the disloyalty of others, you convert it into fuel. Each betrayal sharpens your instincts, refines your judgment about who deserves access to your inner circle. You become colder, harder, more discerning, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You learn to recognize the subtle signals that precede betrayal, developing an intuition that protects you from future harm. This perspective shift represents one of the most powerful revelations on your journey. When you expect betrayal, you remove its power to devastate you. When you anticipate disloyalty, you eliminate the emotional collapse that follows it. You become immune to the weapon that destroys most people, the shocked heartbreak of unexpected betrayal. Write, "Betrayal is the shadow that proves my light," in the comments if you recognize this truth in your own life. Because once you understand that betrayal doesn't diminish your power but confirms it, you begin to view every challenge through the lens of opportunity rather than victimhood. The true power lies not just in anticipating betrayal, but in your response to it. While the masses waste their energy complaining about disloyalty, lamenting the unfairness of it all, the enlightened few transform these wounds into weapons. Each betrayal becomes a catalyst for evolution, hardening your resolve, sharpening your discernment, and ultimately making you more untouchable than before. This alchemy, converting pain into power, represents one of the most profound transformations on your journey. Instead of allowing betrayal to diminish you, you use it as confirmation that you've become significant enough to threaten others. Their attempts to undermine you become the very foundation upon which you build greater strength. This isn't mere resilience, it's strategic evolution, using the very forces meant to destroy you as the raw material for your advancement. But to truly master this principle, you must embrace what most fear above all else: isolation. Contemplate this revelation. Silence is where kings are forged, while noise is where slaves are broken. The modern world drowns people in constant chatter, endless notifications, and meaningless conversations that scatter focus and drain vital energy. The masses cling desperately to crowds because the crowd provides comfortable anonymity, a place to hide their weakness behind collective identity. The hidden truth is that the person who cannot sit alone, who cannot bear their own company, is already defeated. They've surrendered control of their mindset to external validation, making them predictable, manipulable, and ultimately powerless. Their decisions flow not from internal clarity but from desperate need for approval. They speak not from conviction but from fear of rejection. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of personal sovereignty, the discipline of solitude. Most view isolation as punishment, as loneliness, as something to be avoided at all costs. But this perspective reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of power dynamics. Isolation isn't loneliness. It's training. It's the crucible in which iron becomes steel, in which potential transforms into mastery. In solitude, you strip away the illusions that comfort you, but keep you weak. You confront the unvarnished truth of who you are and what you must become. Most people fear this truth so profoundly that they keep themselves endlessly distracted, filling every moment with noise to avoid the revelations that silence brings. But the enlightened embrace this confrontation, knowing that in facing these truths, they sharpen themselves into weapons. Consider the journey of every great strategist, every conqueror, every visionary throughout history. At crucial moments, they stepped back from the crowd. They created distance that allowed them to see what others could not. They developed insights that would have been impossible amidst the constant noise of collective thinking. Their breakthroughs came not from consensus, but from the clarity that only isolation can provide. This discipline of solitude becomes your invisible advantage, while others exhaust. Themselves seeking external validation, you cultivate internal certainty. While they fragment their energy across 1,000 distractions, you focus yours with laser precision. While they remain dependent on approval, you become self-sufficient, complete within yourself. Write in the comments, "My silence is my weapon," if you're ready to embrace this discipline, because the transformation from noise to strategic silence represents one of the most powerful shifts in your journey toward becoming truly untouchable. This principle of strategic isolation has been understood by history's most influential minds. Every great strategist, every visionary leader, every revolutionary thinker recognized the necessity of maintaining distance from the crowd. Behind the curtain of their public personas, they cultivated a deliberate separation that preserved their clarity and power. Machiavelli specifically advised rulers to maintain a careful distance from those around them, not out of arrogance, but out of strategic necessity, because excessive familiarity inevitably breeds contempt, and too much openness creates vulnerabilities that others will exploit. Consider this revelation. To always be available is to always be vulnerable. But to withdraw, to cultivate silence, to guard your presence, that is to command genuine respect. This distance isn't about disconnection, it's about creating a boundary that preserves your sovereignty. When you become too accessible, too predictable, too desperate for connection, you surrender the mystery that makes you compelling. The most profound breakthrough occurs when you realize that mastering isolation transforms your relationship with rejection. When you've built your internal fortress, when you've become complete within yourself, rejection loses its devastating sting. The words, actions, and judgments that would once have shattered you now barely register as relevant. Not because you've become numb, but because you no longer depend on external validation to maintain your sense of worth. This self-sufficiency creates an extraordinary shift in your life journey. You no longer chase approval. You no longer make decisions based on fear of abandonment. You no longer compromise your values to maintain relationships. You become your own anchor, your own compass, your own source of validation, and this independence becomes the foundation of genuine strength. Now, observe this paradox. The person who fears isolation becomes addicted to company. This addiction makes them predictable, desperate, easy to manipulate. Their decisions flow not from internal conviction, but from external pressure. Their boundaries dissolve in the face of potential rejection. They say yes when they should say no. They tolerate what should be unacceptable. They compromise what should be non-negotiable, all because they cannot bear the thought of standing alone. But the person who embraces isolation, who masters solitude, who finds completeness within themselves, they become fundamentally unpredictable. They cannot be controlled through the threat of rejection. They cannot be manipulated through the promise of acceptance. Their decisions emerge from internal clarity rather than external pressure. This sovereignty makes them both respected and desired not despite their independence, but because of it. The hidden truth is that humans are instinctively drawn to what they cannot easily obtain, what they cannot fully predict, what they cannot readily control. When you master isolation, you embody these qualities naturally. You become magnetic, not through desperate pursuit, but through sovereign presence. People begin to orbit around you, drawn by the gravity of your self-sufficiency. This transformation represents one of the most powerful revelations on your path. When you master isolation, you master yourself. And when you master yourself, you gain the capacity to influence the world around you from a position of genuine strength rather than desperate need. Write in the comments, "I embrace solitude as my strength," if you recognize how this principle could transform your life. because the journey from fear of isolation to mastery of it represents one of the most profound shifts in personal sovereignty you can experience. This transformation demands more than theoretical understanding. It requires deliberate practice. You must learn to withdraw strategically, to cultivate periods of silence that serve as your forge. Most people mistake withdrawal for weakness, for avoidance, for fear, but the enlightened understand it as preparation. In these moments of strategic isolation, you plan while others react. You build while others talk. You sharpen your mind while others dull theirs with constant noise. The blueprint for genuine power begins with this counterintuitive approach. Learn to relish silence rather than fear it. Use solitude not as escape, but as sanctuary, the sacred space where your vision crystallizes away from the contaminating influence of lesser minds. Plan in secret, move in silence. Build in the shadows until your strength becomes so undeniable that when you finally step into the light, no one comprehends how you transformed so dramatically. They witness only the finished masterpiece, not the meticulous craftsmanship behind it. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. Beyond strategic isolation lies another dimension of personal sovereignty, the cultivation of indifference as armor. This represents perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Machiavellian wisdom. Indifference isn't apathy or numbness. It's the sharpest armor a person can wear, more powerful than steel, more enduring than stone. It makes you untouchable in a world that feeds on emotional vulnerability. Consider this revelation. Most people navigate through life completely exposed, their emotional triggers visible to anyone paying attention. Their happiness, anger, fear, desire, and insecurity lie just beneath the surface, waiting to be exploited. And in this exposed state, they become easy targets for manipulation. The hidden truth is that people survive and advance by exploiting the emotions of others. They provoke to make you lash out. They flatter to lower your guard. They guilt you into submission. They seduce you into dependency. The moment you take their bait, the moment you react predictably to their provocations, you've already surrendered control. You've handed them the very levers they need to move you in whatever direction serves their interests. This dynamic plays out constantly in personal relationships, professional environments, and social hierarchies. The reactionary person becomes a puppet, dancing to strings pulled by more strategic minds. Emotions function as handles, grips that others use to control your behavior. Anger, pride, fear, desire, guilt, these are the access points through which influence operates. But imagine what happens when those handles no longer exist, or when you lock them behind impenetrable armor. Suddenly you become immovable. You stand still while others exhaust themselves trying to provoke reactions that never come. That silence, that lack of expected response, terrifies them because it reveals something they cannot comprehend: complete self-mastery. The person who cannot be provoked, flattered, guilted, or seduced becomes fundamentally uncontrollable. Their decisions flow from internal clarity rather than external manipulation. Their boundaries remain intact against the most sophisticated attempts to breach them. Write in the comments, "Indifference is my armor," if you recognize how emotional reactivity has made you vulnerable in the past. Because the journey from emotionally exploitable to strategically indifferent represents one of the most powerful transformations you can undergo. The true power of indifference emerges when you face direct provocation. Imagine someone attempting to manipulate you through anger, flattery, or guilt, the typical levers most used to control others. But when your face doesn't twitch, when your breathing remains steady, when your pulse doesn't betray you, you create a vacuum of reaction that disarms them completely. That silence, that absence of the expected emotional response, strips them of their primary weapon, influence over your internal state. This strategic indifference creates a profound shift in power dynamics. The manipulator who thrives on your reactions suddenly finds themselves exposed, their tactics rendered useless against your composed presence. While they expected you to flinch, to argue, to defend yourself, your stillness becomes an impenetrable barrier they cannot penetrate. The moment they realize they cannot move you emotionally is the moment they recognize their powerlessness. Machiavelli understood a fundamental truth that most overlook. Appearances often matter more than reality in the arena of power. This insight revolutionizes how you navigate complex social dynamics. Power isn't always about possessing the sharpest sword, it's about being perceived as unshakable, unmovable, inevitable. When others believe you cannot be manipulated, when they perceive you as emotionally sovereign, they treat you accordingly, regardless of what internal battles you might be fighting. Consider how this manifests in everyday encounters. The person who appears calm while chaos erupts around them automatically commands authority. The individual who remains composed when betrayed inspires a certain fear in the betrayer, who expected collapse but witnessed strength. The leader who maintains steadiness when challenged projects dominance without requiring physical demonstration. This projection of imperturbability becomes its own form of power, often more effective than any display of force. This brings us to a crucial distinction that most misunderstand: the difference between indifference and apathy. These concepts appear similar on the surface, but represent fundamentally different mindsets with dramatically different outcomes. Apathy is weakness, an inability to care about anything, a surrender to nihilism, a collapse of purpose and drive. It signals defeat, resignation, and ultimately irrelevance. Indifference, by contrast, represents supreme control, the conscious choice to deny others access to your emotional core. It is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. The indifferent person may experience intense emotions internally, but they make strategic decisions about which feelings they allow to surface, which reactions they permit others to witness. This calculated restraint becomes a form of discipline that few achieve, but all respect when encountered. The revelation here is that indifference doesn't mean you don't care. It means you control what you visibly care about. You decide which provocations deserve response and which are beneath your attention. You determine which challenges warrant your energy and which are merely distractions. This selectivity becomes a signature of personal sovereignty that others instinctively recognize and often unconsciously respect. Write in the comments, "I control what moves me," if you recognize the power of strategic indifference in your own journey. Because the transformation from reactive vulnerability to calculated composure represents one of the most profound shifts in how others perceive and interact with you. The most powerful application of indifference emerges in direct confrontation with manipulators. Consider what happens in these encounters. The manipulator arrives with a proven strategy. Provoke until you react, then exploit that reaction. They poke at your insecurities, challenge your worth, question your abilities, all designed to trigger an emotional response they can then use against you. This pattern plays out in boardrooms, relationships, and everyday interactions, often invisible to those being manipulated. But the transformative revelation occurs when you recognize this game and refuse to play by its rules. When faced with provocation, you stand silent. When baited into argument, you remain calm. When pushed to defend yourself, you stay unmoved. This unexpected composure creates a fundamental shift in the power dynamic. The manipulator suddenly finds themselves performing to an empty theater. Their tactics, which require your emotional engagement to function, collapse. In the face of your strategic indifference, this reversal represents one of the most profound mindset shifts you can experience. The very person who arrived intending to control you through emotional exploitation now stands exposed, their arsenal rendered useless against your composed presence. Their power evaporates not because you fought back, but because you refused to acknowledge the battlefield they chose. Look around at those who command genuine respect in any environment. They are rarely the loudest voices in the room. They are almost never those frantically seeking validation or approval. They are not the ones reacting emotionally to every challenge or criticism. True respect gravitates naturally toward those who maintain composure when others lose theirs, those who stand still when others scramble, who say little when others ramble, who remain centered when others fracture. This composed presence creates a gravitational field that others instinctively respond to. It communicates something primal about your self-mastery, that you possess the rare discipline to control your responses rather than being controlled by them. In a world where most people are reactive by default, this calculated restraint becomes a signature of power that requires no explanation or justification. It speaks through silence more eloquently than others speak through words. Beyond the external advantages, indifference creates an internal freedom that few experience but all instinctively desire. Once you no longer react to insults, humiliation loses its sting entirely. The words and actions designed to wound you bounce harmlessly off the armor of your indifference. What would devastate others barely registers in your awareness because you've severed the connection between external judgment and internal worth. Similarly, once you no longer crave validation, the entire apparatus of manipulation loses its grip on your decisions. Flattery cannot seduce you into poor choices. Social pressure cannot push you toward compromise. The promise of acceptance cannot lure you away from your principles. You become liberated from the invisible prison that constrains most people, the desperate need for others' approval that dictates their every move. This journey toward indifference represents perhaps the most powerful personal revolution you can undergo, the transformation from externally defined to internally anchored. Your worth, your decisions, your emotional state all become sovereign territory that others cannot invade without your permission. Right? I refuse to be manipulated in the comments if you recognize how this principle could transform your interactions with those who attempt to control you through emotional exploitation, because the shift from reactivity to strategic indifference represents one of the most profound sources of personal freedom available to you. The journey toward indifference isn't achieved in a single moment of revelation. It's built methodically, piece by piece, like armor being forged in the fires of experience. Each component serves a specific purpose in your protection against the emotional manipulation that governs most relationships. This armor doesn't form naturally. It must be deliberately constructed through consistent practice and awareness of your emotional triggers. Consider each piece of this armor and its specific function. The first component is control over anger, perhaps the most exploited emotion in human interaction. When insulted or challenged, your instinctive response is to defend, to attack, to prove yourself. But in that reaction lies your vulnerability. The disciplined response is silence, allowing provocative words to fall into a void where they lose all power. Nothing disarms an opponent faster than the absence of the reaction they anticipated. The second piece is mastery over pride, that desperate need to be recognized, acknowledged, respected. Most waste tremendous energy proving themselves to people whose opinions hold no genuine value. The strategic mind recognizes this trap and refuses to participate. Your accomplishments require no defense. Your value needs no explanation. Your presence, your discipline, your silence becomes evidence enough of your worth. The third component is control over desire, the craving for approval, for acceptance, for pleasure. These appetites, when left unchecked, create predictable patterns that others can easily exploit. A man who cannot manage his hungers will always be led on a leash by those who recognize and manipulate them. Every desire becomes a potential point of control, every craving a vulnerability to be exploited. The final piece, perhaps the most crucial, is mastery over fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of judgment. This emotion, more than any other, dictates the decisions of the masses. They avoid necessary conflicts out of fear. They remain in damaging situations out of fear. They compromise their principles out of fear. But when you master this emotion, when you face what others avoid, you gain access to opportunities they'll never experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. Beyond the armor of indifference lies an even more sophisticated dimension of power, the strategic manipulation of perception. This represents the battlefield most never see, the terrain where true influence operates beneath the surface. The profound revelation here is that the greatest power isn't found in what you actually are, but in what others believe you to be. This insight shatters conventional understanding of influence. Most think power flows from objective reality, from actual strength, actual intelligence, actual resources. But Machiavelli understood that perception often matters more than substance. People respond not to your true capabilities, but to their perception of those capabilities. They react not to your actual intentions, but to what they believe your intentions to be. The strategic mind recognizes that people aren't searching for truth. They're searching for certainty, for meaning, for confidence. And if you can project these qualities convincingly, you can shape reality itself through the lens of others' perceptions. This isn't deception. It's understanding the primal language of influence that operates beneath conscious awareness. Put "perception is my weapon" in the comments. If you recognize how the battle for influence often takes place not in objective reality, but in the realm of perception. Because once you understand that others respond primarily to what they believe rather than what is, you gain access to an entirely different dimension of strategic influence. This insight reveals one of the most powerful hidden truths about human psychology. People rarely search for objective truth. They hunger for certainty in an uncertain world. They crave meaning amid chaos. They seek confidence to follow when their own vision falters. And here lies your advantage. If you can project unwavering certainty, if you can control precisely what others see of you, you can command without raising your voice. You can influence without obvious effort. You can rule without visible force. Think about what happens when someone projects absolute conviction in their words and actions. Others naturally align themselves with this certainty, often without conscious awareness. They interpret confidence as competence, steadiness as strength, and certainty as truth, even when evidence might suggest otherwise. This isn't manipulation. It's understanding the fundamental architecture of human perception and working within it rather than against it. To weaponize perception effectively, you must master control over three distinct realms that shape how others experience you. The first is silence, perhaps the most misunderstood element of perception management. Words expose you, make you predictable, and create opportunities for misinterpretation. But strategic silence creates a vacuum that others fill with their own assumptions, often projecting power, calculation, and depth where there might be none. When you remain silent, they imagine you're contemplating profound strategies. When you withhold reaction, they assume you possess information they lack. The second realm is presence. The way you physically occupy space communicates more about your internal state than words ever. Good, indifference in your eyes, steadiness in your posture, control in your movements and tone. These elements create an aura that others cannot ignore and rarely question. Remember this transformation. Do not fidget, Do not rush. Do not display nervousness or uncertainty in your physicality. Every gesture must silently communicate, I am already in control. Even your enemies will hesitate when your presence radiates absolute certainty. The third realm is narrative, the story others tell. About you ultimately becomes more powerful than any story you could tell about yourself. This requires careful cultivation. Let your victories be visible without obvious boasting. Let your discipline be evident without explanation. Let your indifference to setbacks become legendary through consistent demonstration rather than declaration. Never explain yourself. Explanations diminish your stature and expose vulnerabilities. Instead, let your actions, your control, your aura write the story that others will eagerly spread on your behalf. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic. Beyond perception management lies an even more primal dimension of influence, the calculated use of fear. This represents the oldest language of power, predating words, laws, and even civilization itself. Fear moved armies before generals had titles. It broke rebellions before kings had crowns. It bent wills before manipulation had a name. And when wielded with precision rather than recklessness, fear makes you truly untouchable. Type, "Fear is my silent weapon," in the comments if you recognize how calculated intimidation might have protected you in situations where kindness alone would have left you vulnerable. Because understanding the strategic application of fear represents one of the most profound shifts in how you navigate environments where respect must be earned rather than freely given. This revelation shatters one of the most persistent illusions in social dynamics, that kindness alone earns respect. The uncomfortable truth is that people rarely respect pure kindness unless it's backed by the implicit understanding that you can also exercise force when necessary. This isn't cynicism, it's the raw architecture of human psychology that operates beneath polite social conventions. Machiavelli articulated this principle with brutal clarity. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Love is fragile, conditional, and evaporates during crisis. But fear, when wielded strategically, creates a consistent foundation for influence that persists even when affection fades. The profound insight here is that fear isn't the enemy of respect. It's often its silent prerequisite. Without some element of consequences, without some understanding of boundaries that cannot be crossed, kindness becomes interpreted as weakness rather than virtue. Generosity becomes expected rather than appreciated. Loyalty becomes exploited rather than reciprocated. The strategic application of fear provides the necessary context that makes your positive qualities valued rather than taken for granted. But there's a crucial distinction between strategic intimidation and crude brutality. Fear, when mishandled, destroys what it could otherwise build. The master of influence understands that fear functions like fire, powerful when controlled, devastating when unleashed carelessly. Too little fear, and you will inevitably be taken for granted, your boundaries violated, your generosity exploited. Too much fear, and people will secretly conspire against you, dreaming of your downfall while smiling to your face. The transformation lies in finding precise balance, inspiring enough fear to ensure respect without generating so much hatred that rebellion becomes inevitable. This balance isn't achieved through explicit threats or displays of aggression. It's cultivated through consistent enforcement of boundaries, through the quiet certainty that crossing you carries consequences, through the composed indifference that makes others unable to predict exactly how you might respond. The most effective intimidation isn't loud, it's implied. It doesn't announce itself, it's simply understood. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic. Beyond the strategic application of fear lies an even more sophisticated dimension of influence, understanding power as an economy. This perspective revolutionizes how you manage your resources of influence. Power isn't abstract or metaphorical, it's literal currency. It flows, exchanges, is spent, hoarded, traded, and stolen, just like financial wealth. And like financial wealth, it can be squandered through carelessness or multiplied through strategic management. The revelation that most never grasp is that many people are broke in power not because the world has stripped them, but because they've recklessly squandered their own treasury. They give away respect for free without requiring it in return. They hand out their attention like worthless pennies to anyone who demands it. They waste their time, perhaps their most precious resource, on people and pursuits that offer no return on investment. And then they wonder why they feel empty, why no one respects their boundaries, why their influence seems non-existent. If you recognize this pattern in your own journey, write, "I guard my power" in the comments. Because understanding power as a precious resource that must be managed with precision represents one of the most transformative shifts in how you build and maintain influence in every domain of your life. The strategic management of power begins with a fundamental shift in how you view your personal resources. Every word you speak costs something. Every emotion you reveal represents a withdrawal from your vault. Every moment of attention you grant to others diminishes your reserves unless it generates equal return. The weak spend these resources recklessly, arguing with fools, oversharing with strangers, chasing approval from the unworthy, investing time in relationships that offer no reciprocal value. Their power economy operates in permanent deficit. The transformation occurs when you begin treating your resources with the same discipline a king protects his treasury. You speak rarely, but when you do, your words carry weight precisely because they are not wasted. You reveal emotion selectively, making your approval valuable through its scarcity. You distribute your attention like precious coins, rather than worthless paper. This economy of power doesn't make you cold. It makes you deliberate. It doesn't make you distant. It makes you valuable. Consider the paradox that shapes all human interaction. What is abundant becomes ignored, while what is rare becomes worshipped. The person who is always available inevitably loses respect, while the one who is difficult to reach becomes desired. The one who reveals everything becomes predictable, while the one who maintains mystery becomes magnetic. The one who gives endlessly receives nothing, while the one who gives selectively receives everything. Scarcity creates value. This principle operates in every domain of influence. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic. Beyond the economy of power lies perhaps the most profound dimension of personal sovereignty, the ability to transform pain into power. This alchemical process represents the ultimate test of your journey. Pain is the universal language of existence. Every person will experience betrayal, rejection, humiliation, loss, and failure. These aren't accidents or anomalies, they're guarantees. They're the inevitable price the world extracts from everyone who dares to exist. The revelation that separates the extraordinary from the ordinary isn't whether you'll suffer, it's what you'll do with your suffering. Most people break under pain. They collapse, seeking sympathy, begging for pity, drowning in their wounds. And when the world inevitably grows bored with their weakness, they're discarded as irrelevant. But a rare few, those with the vision to see opportunity in adversity, refuse to be defined by their suffering. They transmute it, they weaponize it, they forge it into unbreakable strength. This transformation occurs through three distinct stages that most never complete. The first is acceptance, the unflinching recognition that pain isn't injustice, it's reality. The strong stop begging for fairness, stop waiting for relief. Stop pretending the world owes them mercy. Pain isn't exceptional, it's universal. Every person bleeds, every leader struggles, every visionary faces resistance. The difference is that the strong accept pain as the price of living rather than wasting energy fighting against its inevitability. The second stage is analysis, the strategic examination of what pain is trying to teach you. Every betrayal reveals who shouldn't be trusted. Every rejection exposes where not to invest your energy. Every humiliation highlights a vulnerability in your armor that needs strengthening. Pain always delivers a message, but most are too blinded by emotion to decode it. The strong study their suffering with the same strategic detachment they would analyze any other valuable intelligence. The third stage is transmutation, the process of channeling raw emotional energy into productive power. Pain generates tremendous force. Most allow it to decay into despair, but the strong direct it. With precision, they funnel heartbreak into discipline, betrayal into strategy, humiliation into hunger. The fire that reduces most to ash becomes the forge that transforms the exceptional into steel. Write, "My pain becomes my power" in the comments if you recognize how your greatest struggles might become your most powerful advantages. Because the journey from victim to victor begins with this fundamental decision about how you'll respond to the inevitable wounds life inflicts. And this is the destination, becoming truly untouchable. Not invincible, not immortal, but sovereign within yourself. A state of being where betrayal cannot shake you because you expected it. Rejection cannot wound you because you don't depend on others' approval. Loss cannot break you because you've already built your empire within. This transformation isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming complete. The untouchable individual has cut the chains of dependency that enslave most people. They don't collapse when others leave, don't shatter when betrayed, don't spiral when challenged, because their power flows from within rather than being borrowed from without. This journey we've explored together isn't about manipulating others. It's about liberating yourself from being manipulated. It's about building sovereignty in a world designed to keep you dependent. If something in this message resonated with you, if you felt that fire of recognition ignite as we explored these principles, I invite you to become part of this community. Subscribe to join others on this same path of transformation. Each video builds upon these foundations, offering new dimensions of personal sovereignty that most will never discover. Drop "I am becoming untouchable" in the comments if these ideas have begun to shift your perspective. Your comment becomes both declaration and commitment, marking the moment you chose sovereignty over dependency, strength over victimhood, strategy over reaction. If you found value in these insights, that like button is your acknowledgement of the connection we've built through these ideas. It's not just support for the channel, it's recognition that these principles have touched something essential within you. There's a video right here that takes these concepts even deeper, exploring how to apply these principles in specific situations that challenge most people. Click and continue this journey with me there, because the path to becoming truly untouchable has only just begun.